after you got funded by Y-Combinator, what happened next?
Before YC happened, our ambition was to become like the biggest furniture company in maybe one part of Delhi, right? That's how small we were thinking about. When we came to YC, it was like, okay, why can't you be the next IKEA?
What would you say is some of the biggest mistakes that you wish you could have avoided?
I think too many of them. Way too many mistakes.
What do you think are the bets that you were right? Is it Robot GPT or it's something else that you think that's gonna change the trajectory of your company?
For us, I think it's the part where...
So that's the insight. That's when you realize an affordable robotics arm is required in this world for humanity to progress.
Yes.
And when you figure that out and decided to make that pivot, what happened next?
It was hard. Like, we were broke.
Hey, Abhinav. Thanks for coming to the pod.
Yeah, glad to be here.
So you have been a founder of a up-and-coming Series A robotics arm company, a pretty successful one.
Yeah.
And what's interesting about you is that unlike many of the deep tech founders, you actually came from, a very humble background, I would say.
Yeah, you could say that.
And it's always fascinating because building a robotics arm company or any type of deep tech company usually requires a lot of kind of resources, but you are able to, push through all the hurdles and still be able to build a pretty successful robotics arm startup. And that is a story that I really find really inspiring. But before we dive into your story and your journey, can you tell the audience what is Orangewood?
So we built AI-powered robotic arms, which now you'll be able to talk to program them into doing things. It's also going to be the most affordable robots in the world, like maybe a fraction of the labor cost in that particular geography. And the way we see this is as your labor has been like the biggest constraint now before we move to like the next level of civilization. It's the biggest thing which is holding us back. And the moment like we get a lot of these mundane tasks out of humanity's, bandwidth, like we will just clear out so much and we'll all start building the next, building the humanity 2.0. Yeah.
Very, very interesting. What does your robot do right now? What can the robots do?
So from a commercial perspective, okay, so first of all, it's like a computer with a hand, right? You can actually program it to do almost everything which a human hand can do, with some constraints. But for now, our focus is, use cases like industrial painting and things like machine tending. And by machine tending, it's like, it basically can operate another machine, just like an oven or a CNC machine or a 3D printer or a drill press. Yeah, any of these machines can now be operated by our robots.
Super cool. And you're selling these robots to, it sounds like, what manufacturing companies? What kind of businesses do you sell these robots to?
So we are selling to mostly manufacturers. Most of these manufacturers, like especially the smaller ones, they're struggling with keeping their positions filled. Most young people do not want to work in factories.
Yeah.
And it's very hard for them, like very hard for small manufacturers, mom and pop shops who have been, existing for 50, 60 years or more to keep getting young people to fill in the positions. And what we've found out is that if you get a robotic arm in places where it's the most dangerous or most boring, people are able to see like better ROI, and then young people want to work with other robots. So that's also the kind of interesting angle which we are able to see.
Very interesting. So your robots, it seems like it's going to replace the factory workers.
Not entirely replace, kind of help out, right? Like all the jobs which no factory worker wants to do, we'll be taking those jobs.
And so you sell this to manufacturing companies. What other companies do you see your use cases will be your technology will be really helpful?
I think food retail is the next thing which, our technology can disrupt. we already have something called RoboGPT, where you can teach a robot very quickly to perform a task. It could be a simple thing like, just take out pizza from an oven and then make it into slices. Something of this sort, a job of this sort is right now done by humans, and they have to be present there. They have to be day in, day out to be doing these things. But now a robot can just do this. So we believe like food retail is going to be the next disruption using our technology.
Super interesting. Super interesting. How big is the company today?
So we are around 45 people.
45 people.
Yeah.
I saw from your website, you are based in both the US and India.
Yes.
So that lead to my next question. What made you start this company? Right? Like there's so many ideas that you could have pursued, right? There is, software, there's so many kind of easier ideas, and this is one of the hardest sort of pursuit that you could do. What made you start the company?
Uh, so we started as a furniture company. We were building furniture using robots, or by robot, it was like basically a home built CNC machine where,
Mhm.
in my parents' basement with me and my co-founders, we basically built this together to start supplying to co-working spaces, which were a huge thing back in like the 2017s and 18s. We saw this as an opportunity to do something in this space, which can grow quickly. And that was the time when we got into YC. When we came to YC, we were like, yeah, this can go big. And one of the interesting things which happened, when we were trying to scale the furniture company, was the fact that we needed people. We needed painters. We needed, other people who could finish furniture. Unless you have all of the processes automated, like automation is a very zero or one process, right? There's no mid automation. Basically, the moment you need to have a human show up in your factory and punch in, that means you're not automating enough. It's like you cannot just do like one part of the job and call it a day. So we had like one part of the process which was like 10x faster, better than anything else which existed, but the rest of the processes were not, like painting, finishing, and other things. So it became clearer that we had to get like a robotic arm. We had to buy a robotic arm, and at that time it was like for $35,000. And
Wow.
my engineering math, I started my career as an automotive engineer, where my job used to be, how do I reduce the price of this Toyota Revit from 28 cents to 7 cents? And so it was a lot of first principle thinking. Now they call it that. I did not know at the time. It just kept like, every time I'll see an object, I'll think, hey, how much would it cost? Like, how would it be built? And then it wasn't sitting well with me that the robot arm, which you can almost like put on your desktop, which is not more sophisticated technically, more than your washing machine, is costing so much. It's costing as much as a BMW 3 Series.
Yeah.
So it wasn't making any sense, and that kind of got us into this rabbit hole where we started finding out what was the problem. Figured out there were a lot of components there which were very, very expensive because they were only made by few companies in the world.
Hmm.
So that kind of led us to digging deeper, finding out, a different supply chain from the automotive industry where the components were like more commoditized. I mean, you could just buy them off anywhere and then use compute or machine learning to basically make them more accurate. So we basically bought low cost hardware from, coming from the automotive supply chain, and then use compute to make it more as accurate as possible for a robotic arm application. So suddenly, you are able to like make robot arms for a fraction of the cost. And that's what we started doing. That was till 2022 when we started doing some of our pilots. The problem we faced then was the fact that programming robots were very hard, and programming robots have been hard for the longest time. The standardization which happened in the computer industry did not happen in the robot arm industry. Right now you can maybe you can get any laptop and then just start writing code there. But that does not happen with robot arms, right? It's you need to go through a course, and then you need to understand coordinate geometry, a lot of other things to be able to start programming a robot. And so it became very clear that yes, if robots have to be democratized, like if the industry has to move forward, not only the cost needs to come down, it needs to be, as easy as operating a smartphone.
Yep.
And that's what we set out to do. We started playing with GPT-3 when it came, much before ChatGPT came. And then I think somewhere around like early 2023, we came up with RoboGPT, where it's a piece of software which lets you teach a robot so that it can be instructed just with natural language to do things. And it also starts getting more senses. It kind of knows, like, if you teach it, hey, this is how a microphone looks like, it will know what the microphone is and then figure out where it is on the table, or in its world, and then maybe pick it up or do something with it. And that kind of gave us superpowers, right? Like, you don't need to do what we call as the hard automation, where you have to put a bunch of infrastructure. It's like commissioned there in a factory. Now we just show up with our robot arm, put it on a table, on a desktop, and then it just starts working after a few hours of training.
Essentially making training robot arms a lot easier, a lot more
Exactly.
cost effective,
Yes.
right? With software
Yes.
and
Absolutely.
with AI.
Yeah.
Very interesting. And you briefly mentioned about Y-combinator.
Yeah.
I know, knowing you, for a while, I know you have a crazy journey even before you get to YC,
Yeah.
right? And take us back, right, from the very beginning when you first had the idea of, from the furniture days, right? How do you even at that point, start a hardware company, right? Given your background, given this, this limited amount of resources that you have at that time, and I remember, and that was back in India.
Yeah, I mean, so I don't see this as like limited resources. It was one of those things where, so my previous company, I was trying to build a vehicle for rural areas in India where they don't have vehicles. And I was trying to build like a sub $3,000 truck in 2010s, where it can be made in like smaller workshops and then can be certified, can be insured. The DMV can basically give it a license to be playing on highways. So that's something I was trying to do because I saw that as something where I can impact that particular sector. And this is like, somewhere when, yeah, I mean, in 2010s, it was only Tesla and maybe few other smaller companies who had started. And now it's obviously very different. I was very drawn to it. Like, I wanted to solve this problem. And then, once you decide, like, as a young person, once you decide, like, okay, this is what I'm going to solve, you always find a way. You will always find, like, there's this invisible hand which comes and help you. Obviously, there's like too many people trying to punch you
Yeah.
in front, like on your face, but then there's this invisible hand which just helps you out. And this is something which I kept seeing over and over again. It kind of makes you not think about the result but actually doing the work. I believe in karma, right? Like, the idea that, yeah, you need to keep doing the work and not expect the results is not something in your hands. So, this kind of life lessons keeps coming back. And if it's your calling, anyone who's thinking of like doing a hardware company, if it's their calling, it will happen. So yeah, I would not like put myself at a, you know, I would not come from a resource constrained perspective. I'll try to figure out how to make it happen.
And how exactly did you make it happen?
Uh, this company or the previous one?
Let's focus on
This one. Okay.
the current company.
So, uh, I was, I mean, I had like some money saved up with some, from some consulting gigs, and then my co-founders had some savings. So we pooled that together, made a CNC machine in my parents' basement, and then started for selling furniture from that. So it was like an open source CNC machine, which we like changed a few things in the code to basically make it more easier for it to like get a new program. And it just started working after that. Like, it was basically giving us more money than which we had invested.
So you start off with building a CNC machine as your first kind of
Yeah.
cash cow business.
Yeah, it was not as much of cash cow. Like, once we started scaling, it did not look like a cash cow. It had its own problems, and the bigger problem, it kind of led us to the bigger problem, like, lack of automation. And then it was very clear that, yes, there's like this big blocker of, humanity reaching its potential. by not having enough automation, and for having enough automations, you need to have low cost robot arms which can be programmed quickly. So that's what we kind of pivoted from building furniture to building this.
So that's the insights. That's when
Yes.
you realize a affordable robotics arm is required
Yes.
in this world for humanity to progress.
Yes.
And when you figure that out and decided to make that pivot, what happened next?
It was hard. Like we were broke. We had like so we were in the YC of Winter 18 batch. We raised around I think 300-ish K in our in our YC
And you
demo.
were able to get into YC,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So that was I assume it was a big unlock.
It was a big unlock. I mean, at that time, only like we had 5 companies from India, doing YC, and yeah, that was huge. I mean, some of them are now billion-dollar companies. So it was a huge unlock. We became more ambitious after that. I think if I had not come to YC, I would have not started a robot arm company.
Do you think you would be where you are today, or do you think you would still be pursuing Orangewood Lab if it's not for YC?
Uh, I think so. Yeah, I mean, I'm like someone who's hard. Like, I don't give up. Like, it's kind of inbuilt. Like, it's very hard for me to give things up.
So if it's not YC, you will still find you believe that you will eventually find a way
Yeah,
to
yeah,
still get funded to
yes,
continue doing what you do.
yeah. I mean, it was obviously helpful, but most funding actually came after the pivot. So it's not that like most of our funding, like more than I think 95% of the funding has come post the pivot. So yeah, it's a very different. It looks very different.
The story sounds like you started a CNC machine, right, for furniture company that makes some cash, and that cash allows you to kind of that journey unlocks the insights,
Yeah.
right, which where you use to apply to Y-Combinator.
Yeah.
And fortunately, getting into Y-Combinator, you have more funding.
Yeah, and so now we had to scale. And for scaling, we got into the problem of like not having robots. So we had to build one. So yeah, I mean, it's kind of, I feel as if I was pushed by destiny into doing this. Yeah.
After you got funded by Y-Combinator, what happened next?
Before YC happened, the way like our ambition was to become like the biggest furniture company in maybe one part of Delhi. Right? That's how small we were thinking about, oh, you know what, like there's this shop owned by this dude, we're gonna have a bigger bungalow or bigger house than him. That's how we were thinking about, the whole company. And when we came to YC, it was like, okay, why can't you be the next IKEA? And then we had like all these amazing people in our batch, right? Like some of those companies are now billion-dollar companies, like okay, Replit, Vanta, all of these guys are in our batch.
And was scaling your batch? Was scaling your batch?
Skill,
Yeah, Skill AI.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean OpenSea, right?
Yeah,
Those guys
OpenSea.
are
Yeah.
So many, like now there are like so many billion-dollar companies, from our batch, and yeah, we were inspired. Like, okay, these guys are building, why can't we? And one of the things which is like very core to, I think, the San Francisco Bay Area is like people think big here. People are not constrained by where they are coming from or what even a lot of times reality is, and that kind of helps, right? Like,
Yeah. Like a distortion.
yeah, exactly. This whole place has distortion field, right? Like, and that helps, right? That helps humanity move forward because that means you can plow billions of dollars into self-driving cars.
Yep.
And then it eventually happens. That was like the biggest value add, like in the initial days. They told us like, okay, what is like the biggest thing you can think about? And that made us more ambitious because other people around you were ambitious. Before that, I was scared. I was scared of my own ambition. And I think that was something which really helped. I think that would be the biggest contributor apart from the other things in the YC.
Yeah. So growing up in Malaysia as well, I also had the same the mindset, right? At that time was that I thought my dream was too ambitious.
Yeah.
Right. And then when I came here, I realized my dreams were not ambitious enough, which is like the opposite.
Yeah, absolutely.
And yeah, San Francisco definitely teaches you how to dream as big as possible. And I think that is what made billion dollar kind of outcome possible, right? Because it has all starts with the mindset of the founder, right? And I think that's a very valuable thing that YC kind of ingrained in the founder, and not just in their own founders, but also throughout the entire community. So after you got ambitious, after going through YC, what was the journey after?
So journey after was like, okay, we got a lot of orders during our YC batch, and
And it was for the robotics arm.
no, no, that was for the CNC
Oh,
furniture.
okay. So
So
it
that's
was
what we
still
were
the
doing. Yeah,
CNC.
that's what
Okay.
we were doing, and we got a lot of orders from different co-working spaces and a few other places, and we were like, okay, let's fulfill them. And at that time, the co-working industry had already started going down. So apparently, it was such that they were like they needed like certain seats to be filled before they can start another thing, but then another co-working, another location. But people just kept pushing money because of WeWork. So they thought this is a party which will keep going on. So we were having issues, right? Like one end we had to become super efficient because our costs had to be low, and we had to build fast. Like we had to build orders, like we had to deliver orders fast. And we were not I mean, we would cut pieces of wood very quickly, but then painting them would become harder. And we would have like a lot of attrition. People will just show up for 2 days, contractual workers, and then they'll not show up after that. And so it became very clear that okay, there's some problem, right? Like
Yep.
we are able to find engineers and other people, but not painters. So it became very clear that yes, there's some problem. When we spoke to some of these guys, they were like, it makes they can make more money driving an Uber than doing painting the whole day while they're inhaling not so great. I mean, they're basically inhaling fumes,
Yep.
right? It's one of those things where you are doing a job which is dangerous for your lungs. And the younger generation, they actually realize it. They have more options. And so they wouldn't want to do this. And, it became very clear that, okay, that we are facing this problem. Is everyone else facing this problem as well? And then we started talking to other people who are like building furniture or car, automotive components. And then they had the same problem, attrition. Nobody was able to fill the positions. They were not able to fulfill orders. And they had to like flatline after a while. It was very, very clear that it's more of, how do these guys increase efficiency if there are not enough people coming?
So that's the insights, and that happens after YC,
That happened after YC. So we pivoted almost like, in 2019, like mid 2019.
and that's when you guys fully focus on the robotics arm
Yes.
aspect. And when you did the pivot, how was the experience, right? Like,
It was hard. I think pivots are not, yeah, it's one of those things where you think, okay, this is my thing. You think like, almost 1,000 hours thinking about that, how to optimize each aspect, and then you have to pivot. So it's much harder for hardware companies. And you have a lot of old equipment. Every time you see them, that's like nostalgia. It just happens. And so it was harder, but I think we were also very, very excited about what we were building next. So
yeah.
some of our early prototypes were amazing. So we were like, yeah, this is cooler.
And were the investors like happy about it? I feel like it's a bigger vision.
Yeah. So investors were actually on board. Like I feel very privileged because we got like some of the best investors. Yeah. Yeah. Shout out to all of them.
So you guys did the pivot, and then that was in 2019. What happened after?
So yeah, we spent like another 2.5, 3 years during pandemic building the next version and the next version of Robotom. It was hard again. We ran out of money. We were broke, and then suddenly, like some got some angel investment, and then the next one, and then the next check. The best part was we kept building. We did not turn off the lights. Like that would have been the easiest thing at any given time of the journey of Orangewood. But yeah, I mean, we kept going. Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds super tough to pivot a hardware company. Yeah, that's insane. Like kudos for keep trying, especially when it comes to challenges like this. It's so easy to then just what getting a job will be so much easier.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's sometimes, you kind of like see yourself as, masochist or extremophiles. Like, but I do not think like that. I'm thinking, okay, what if like this thing actually works, and I'm making so many lives easier. Like I work with my customers and the kind of problems which these people face, like these small business owners face, I mean, nobody's trying to solve for them. And I think that's, as an engineer, I feel I'll be more fulfilled if I build this for them.
Yeah. What was the painting use case was the first thing you guys go after?
Yeah, we went after painting use case, but yeah, it was very clear that yeah, if you make like a 6-axis articulated arm which is low cost, it can be used for so many other things. And so then the next challenge was how do you make it like as easy to program as possible? And then when AI like GPT-3 came out, it was very clear that yes, this is the direction we want to go in.
And that's the big bet that you guys
Yes.
bet on, which
Yes.
is LLM powered, low cost, essentially very software driven robotics for any kind of companies that want to replace kind of repetitive tasks, be able to build those movement right themselves with the help of AI.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Very interesting. Yeah. Wow. So it sounds like a very general purpose type of robotics that you guys build. And
Yeah,
allow.
absolutely. I mean, we want it to be like more like a tool where other people can build on top. It's just that, like whenever we think about scale, it makes so much more sense if people know how to like program this in a much easier way, that would be so much better than, one of like our engineers goes to the
Yeah.
site and does
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
And it's like it just stays like an alien thing where nobody touches it. So I mean, I've seen those kind of factories where there's like one part of the factory you have like a very expensive equipment, and then only few people are about to allowed to like go in there.
Yeah.
I want like every worker should be able to like just play with it. That's how easy I want it to be.
Even non-developers.
Yeah, absolutely. Like it should be like kids should be able to play with this. So we do work with a lot of universities, in the Bay Area, like Santa Clara University, Stanford, few other places in the East Coast. So the idea is that it should be like the best robot people should think about to when they start their robotic journey.
Yeah, that's a very exciting vision. Anyone can control a robotic arm or like build a robotic arm experience themselves without technical background and
Absolutely.
be able to kind of have the robot assist themselves, right?
Yep.
Wow. So fast forward to 2024. Looking back after going through YC, after building a company, commercializing the robot arms you guys built, what would you say is some of the biggest mistakes that you wish you could have avoided?
I think too many of them. Way too many mistakes. Like it's how hardware gets built. It's not something which was probably unique to us. I've obviously thought a lot about it. I think the biggest mistake would be hiring on resume instead of like the character. And we've kind of learned the hard way. Some of our people, they really were good at what they did, but their heart wasn't in believing the fact that this can be done. So, if you hire like the best mechanical engineer in the world, if they don't believe that this thing is going to work, it's not going to work. And this is something which I've seen again and again. And we were actually better off without those people.
Really?
Yeah. So if you tell a much younger person something which they don't know if it's impossible, they'll still try to do it. And sometimes they are right. And this is something which we have seen, like very young people without experience. Obviously, they'll make mistakes where they'll make mistakes which are probably should not have been made in the whole build. Like there would be things which were like a solved problem 20 years ago, but they did not know it. But then it would still work. And I think that's what has been a key insight. Like you hire for character instead of like resume.
Yeah, yeah. From my experience as founder as well, I think it's a startup. You want to optimize for talent that can learn quickly and move fast, and at the same time has this diehard kind of attitude for the vision of the startup.
Absolutely.
Instead of somebody who is very credentialed, right, or maybe came from big tech and it's used to a certain way of working that is not super suitable for like an early stage startup who is trying to move fast and trying to sort of challenge the status quo, right?
Yeah.
And besides hiring, when it comes to developing, the robots, is there any big mistakes that you made?
Oh yeah, yeah. Supply chain issues. I think one of the things which we should have done was to basically at least on the prototyping scale, try to do a lot of things in house because you can do rapidly, you can prototype rapidly. So if you think in the recent, like in the past 10 years, 3D printing has actually helped us do that, right? Like people can just keep rapidly iterating before they go to the final build. I think I should have done that more. Like obviously we do a lot of 3D printing, but then yeah, a lot of other machines we should have just got in house. That helps you with like your iteration cycles, and it also builds a confidence in your team that this can be done. Versus if it's outside, because every vendor would kind of act as if they're like too
Yeah.
specialized, and then they kind of get more power on that particular thing, and then they have more power, and then they can delay your projects. So if it's not too complicated, try to get it in house. Like figure out, like invent ways of building this in a much easier way. I mean, like I'm surprised how many of those things could have been done in house, and then we could have had much faster iterative cycles, which we did not.
So especially when it comes to hardware.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously software, since you guys also build it in-house.
Yep. Software is like, it depends, what kind of software. Like if there are pieces of software, there's so much of open source work available. So, it makes sense to start using that, but then definitely optimize as you move forward. Yeah.
Besides kind of building in-house, which is a really valuable lesson, right? Like a lot of people, right? They want it fast. So, and hiring obviously is a process. So outsourcing is like the shortcut to go,
Mm.
right? And what would you say, are when it comes to, is there any kind of big mistakes that you have done in your journey that you would absolutely would not do again?
I think it's about, there are things that you kind of get when you become more mature as a founder, right? Like I think how to deal with people in a better way, how to keep everyone motivated, everyone, on the goal. I would have done it better. This is what I feel.
And switching to from from the biggest mistakes, what do you think are the bets that you were right? So going back to some of the examples, right? Apple made a huge bet on personal computing and GUI, right? When the standard kind of experience at the time was mostly command line, right? Amazon made a crazy bet on Amazon Prime, in the really early days of 2005.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time launching AWS in 2006, where the cloud market at the time was extremely small. What do you think are the bets that you were right? Is it Robot GPT or there's something else that you think are going to be that's going to change the trajectory of your company?
Absolutely. So I think I'll, also add an example of like, NVIDIA going on the GPU route, right? Like that has changed the world, and obviously the company's fortune. For us, I think is the part where we had to build the hardware from scratch, on a completely new architecture which does not exist. That was, something which gives us so much alpha, like as we move forward, like the ability to make robots on your own when you actually control each aspect, like even the firmware, that gives us so much power when it comes to AI. Because right now there are like so many layers of software before, like if anyone else develops it versus we develop it, our AI sits right next to the firmware or maybe even a part of the thing. It's kind of the same thing. But for other companies, there's like at least 3 to 4 different layers which they have to talk to before the AI works on other companies' hardwares, right? It's almost like Tesla trying to give the best experience to their customers by building both software and hardware. Like you could not have
Yep.
built any of these things. Like there's no, I mean, almost every other car's software just sucks.
Yep. Actually, Steve Jobs once said the best software company builds their own hardware.
Exactly. And that's what we kind of believe in. Like our company, at least two-thirds of the people, two-thirds of the technical people, engineers, they actually write code. So we are, as much as a software company as anyone else is, we just like distribute our software through hardware.
Yeah, I can totally see that. How do you see the future of robotics and AI? Right, given that you've been in space for a while, right? With LLMs becoming more and more popular, what do you think of the future?
I'm like super excited about the future. I mean, it's just something which kind of keeps me going, keeps everyone in my team, just get going because of the fact that you know, now you can do a lot of things which were not possible back in 2022. And all of that has basically started because of, the large language models and, and the newer language models which are coming out. I'm like quite bullish on, both the approaches of using small language models and large language models for robotics. But yes, like for us, I think it makes more sense to be doing working with, specialized language models, which are doing one job and one job in a very good way. On like a macro scale, like imagine, all the things which you see around in this room were made by humans by their hands. So many of human hours have gone into things which can now be done by machines themselves. And so we will see the level of industrialization which we haven't seen in the past 200 years happening in the maybe in the next
In the
20
next,
years.
it's going to be accelerated so quickly.
Absolutely. So we will get to a point where we will have abundance. Nobody in the world is going to struggle because of not having enough tools or not having enough, maybe food on the table. All of these things will happen because there were some crazy people in like San Francisco and everywhere else in the world who just wanted to make it their life's mission to make robots more accessible. And I think I'm part of that movement, and very proud of this part, and that just keeps me up all night, and very very excited to be building on this.
What do you think we will have in the next 5 years in robotics?
Yeah, so we live in San Francisco, and we have like self-driving cars moving all around the city, so we are already kind of living in the future. I believe this is how it's going to be. You'll probably not. Okay, so one of the simplest thing is like you'll get coffee at night. You don't have to drive up to some crazy place which is like a 24/7 coffee shop. There would be like a robot which will give you coffee right next to wherever you get it in the during daytime. I think that would be one thing which I'd like to see. Then the food retail will change entirely. Like you will have more and more robots, more humans as well, but more robots as well. I think it will just become more lucrative. The whole retail sector, the food retail, the prices for commodities will come down. They will keep coming down every year, after like this point. And yeah, I'm just very very excited about the future.
Do you think more and more retail shops will have robots? More and more kind of industrial industry would utilize robots to aid their kind of operations.
Yeah, and there are like so many layers to it, right? Right now, all the a lot of things are getting shipped from Asia and other places, right? If you are producing locally, you would be consuming less amount of energy. The carbon footprint is going to become lower because you are producing most things locally.
Hmm.
And there are like so many levels of impact it can have on the life on this planet. I mean, it's just crazy, just to think about all of this. Yeah, like
Yeah, it's insane. And I remember there's this podcast that was recently uploaded with Sam Altman. He actually said AGI is going to happen in 2025. And I'm like, wait, isn't that next year?
yeah, it's already here.
What do you think about that?
uh, yeah, I'm quite bullish, right? Like we did not know, like by 2024, if you just use the oven model or any of the latest models, the kind of things which they are able to pull off is crazy. I mean, I see the rate of change becoming,
Yep.
much faster. Like it's the like imagine the third differential of
Yeah.
of change is just much faster. I think. I mean, it's gonna happen eventually. You may like maybe miss out by like few years here or there, but then it would happen very soon.
So everybody will have a personal robot
Yes.
at home,
Yeah,
making
absolutely.
coffee.
Absolutely, everything, right? Like I'm quite bullish on home robots as well. I know like some friends who are building those, and some of the most successful people are now getting into this. So I'm very very bullish about this. But yes, I think the question is like, what would we build after all of our chores or all of the things which do not matter so much are taken away by robots? I think we are going to build the next level of humanity with this.
If Orangewood becomes extremely successful, how would the world be different?
I think it will have abundance. That's the one thing which, I mean, I truly believe in the fact that the human life is precious, right? And, the philosophy, like the Indian philosophy where I come from, the Hindu philosophy, it's about like abundance, it basically is trying to make your life and, to seek a better life so that you can like think about doing like better things once you have once you have abundance. So people will know. I mean, there's no reason for the people to fight once you have abundance.
So you think people who have more time on their hands, right, to work on more important things, and
Exactly.
all the mundane tasks, all the repetitive tasks, for example, in manufacturing, will be all replaced by robots or your robotics arm.
Absolutely. Yes, that's the idea.
And then what do we do with those time then?
I think we will have new things to think about. It's like life means, having experiences. And once you have achieved this level of robotic automation in the world, I think a lot of humanity will have more times on their hands to pursue the things which they want to do, and not thinking about money or, other things. Like once we have abundance, then there's no reason for us to worry about things, and then we can pursue all our dreams.
Yeah, yeah. Thinking about the world, before the 1950s, right? There's so many things that are honestly not productive for human to do,
Absolutely.
right? And for example, which is ATM back in the days was not automated, right? You have to, yeah, it was somebody's job to like withdraw cash to you, right? And now when it's automated, it's more the jobs now shift to becoming doing something more productive.
Exactly. And there's an example which my co-founder Aditya, he keeps telling me about, like, back in the during the time in Egypt when they were building the pyramids, right? Like 80% of the people were just involved in building the pyramids. And then it's basically a tomb for a guy, right?
Yep.
I mean, if you look at, like, most of us are basically building for someone, right? It's not for us. It's like we are still those laborers who are working for a thing.
Yep.
And a lot of times that thing is money, right? It
Yep.
could be for your country or or for your society, but in the end it's actually for someone. Now, like, this will give us an opportunity to actually start thinking about ourselves, and this is what I truly believe. Like, this is what robotics, like, once we don't need labor, like low labor becomes optional, people will start doing things which matter more to them.
That's super inspiring. Yeah. If you're a 22-year-old again, right, knowing what you know now, what kind of company would you have started? Would it still be Orangewood
I think
Lab?
I feel like 22. There's no.
You still feel like you're 22.
Yeah, I am. It's almost like, I'll be like one of those guys where, till the time I don't have a lot of robots out there, I'm just gonna be young, and then one day you'll just see me like this old dude. Yeah, like one day it's just gonna happen. So, okay, so there are a lot of sectors which I feel very excited about. One is nuclear. I mean, that's people should be building on power, right? Like, that's the amount of deregulation which is going to happen in next 5 years is going to be awesome, right? Like, you've seen regulated industry for the longest time, and now it's going to get deregulated more and more. So I believe like this is the time to build in nuclear, both fission and fusion. I mean, personal aviation is something I'm really excited about. Um, like people building drones, especially for transportation, hypersonic flights. These are some of the areas I would want to work on.
So let's dive into nucleus because that's interesting. Why do you think that's like something that you would start and it's something of importance to do in the for humanity's future?
Yeah, so if you look at the way, so development is like directly correlated to energy prices and energy abundance.
Hmm.
Like, if you look at any geography, any sub geography in any part of the world, the energy abundance kind of leads to better outcomes for them. And so suddenly, like, imagine, like, if it costs, let's say, $100 right now for 1 megawatt of energy, what if it goes down to $1 or even less? So suddenly, like, if there was an equation for development on one part, you just make that variable to zero, and then suddenly the rest of things can grow faster. So this is what I believe. Like the moment you have more abundant power, you will see a lot of development happening on its own. So that is something which keeps me excited.
So is there one thing, is that one unlock that unlocks everything else?
Yes.
Is how you say it. It's like the infrastructure that's gonna unlock the future development of many innovations.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Super interesting. Yeah. Thank you so much for coming to the pod.
Yeah, absolutely. This was fun.